Okay, so this is the session on longitudinal perspectives. We have four presentations and two discussants. And let's try to keep pretty strictly to 10 minutes per presenter. And I have a timer that will go off after 9 minutes, and that'll be your 1-minute warning to say the most important thing and conclude. Okay, so our first talk is by Julien Naveau and Marcel Meyret from NTA Canada. To what extent are the more recent life cycle deficit age profiles different from previous years? So, Julien.
Full screen first. Hi everyone, so I'm Julien Naveau, and I changed a bit my presentation title because, as I told Ron, we just digested the new release from the NTA. It was really descriptive first, and I wanted to have something a bit more fun. So my title is Intergenerational Economy in Canada. Question: A Tale of Two Countries. And I borrowed this title from a famous book from Richard Saillant, who evidence that population aging is really faster in eastern provinces of the Atlantics and of Quebec, leading maybe to too many needs for federal transfers. And I centered my presentation to compare Quebec, where I live, with the rest of Canada. So what we did before this presentation was introducing NTA by regions between 1998 and 2013. We introduced them in several seminars, and today the first release of the update up to 2017. So I will go fast on these figures. So as you might know, in Canada there is one province called Quebec where French is the most spoken language in comparison with other provinces where English is the main language. We have some differences, but on average, only 3.8% of people speak French in other provinces and territories. In Quebec, the dependency ratio is higher than the rest of Canada. So the population aging process is faster and it's higher. Consequently, Quebec received more public transfers from the rest of Canada in net, so 3.8% of GDP, which is pretty high. And for the future, the impact of COVID-19 crisis might be more important in Quebec than in the rest of Canada. And we can add to that two independence referendum I think it's 1980 and in 1995. So as you might know, there are there was some troubles in Canada. Now it's a bit more different, and you will see why. So I have really shortly some questions. So first, how did per capita consumption evolve at different ages, at dependent ages and at working age groups in Quebec versus other provinces? And is there any imbalance between age group? Spoiler, it will be a yes. But you already know that if you came to my previous presentation. And how this imbalance between age groups was explained. Is it because of public transfers that goes to some age group, or labor income or asset income, etc.? And we will analyze the impact of our very preliminary result on the Canadian Federation. So first, let's go to the figure. What is that? It's per capita consumption for Quebec and other provinces by 3 age group, and it's in per capita values and in constant Canadian dollars. So as you can see, per capita consumption is higher in other provinces, right? Something else really interesting, which I will focus on, is that per capita consumption after 65 years old stagnated after the 2008 crisis in Quebec. And it's one of the major results that we found, thanks to the update. And we will try to explain, especially this part, why this consumption stagnates after 65 years old in Quebec, but not in other provinces. Oh, sorry. So let's go directly to the other figures. So first, let's analyze how public transfer evolved per capita. It's the same graph, but only for public transfer, it's not public consumptions. So first, public transfers received at dependent age group is higher in Quebec, which means that the federal government plays a role of reducing inequalities in Canada. And something really interesting here is at 75 years old and more. So public transfer, and we are still digesting it now, are decreasing after, let's say, 2010 in other provinces, but so per capita in constant dollars. But it's not the case in Quebec, where it's stabilizing. So, and if now we analyze only the labor income values, we have something like that. So as you can see, labor income between 25 and 64 is higher in other provinces than Quebec. That's why we have those transfers to Quebec. And it's partly explained by population aging. And what is interesting here is what happens at 65 and more. So in Quebec, labor income increases after 65 years old. It's mainly because of people working up to 70 years old. But it increased much more in other provinces. And I didn't do it here, but if you look at asset income, it's quite the same. So it increases in Quebec and in other provinces, but it's really faster in other provinces. So individual resources increase much more fastly in other provinces than public transfers. So basically, one of the problems is that why in Quebec the participation rate is pretty low for elder working age groups. It's much higher in other provinces. And if you look at 65, 68 years old, the gap seems to increase over time, especially after the 2008 crisis. And for the future, it's one of our problems. The population aging process is faster in Quebec. So we work less between 60 and 69 years old in comparison with other provinces. We have more people over 65 years old. So I will conclude really fast. So as you can see, it's a preliminary work, and I focused here on Quebec. So population aging is faster in Quebec. And labor income for working age group and older workers is lower. And there is an increasing gap regarding participation rate, especially between 65 and 68. And at the same time, we observe that per capita public transfer stagnates in Quebec after 65 years old, while it decreases slowly in the rest of Canada. So meaning that finally, we have a more, let's say, liberal country in the rest of Canada, while public transfers remain stable for Quebec. So for the future, we will have more in public transfer to Quebec, while population aging impact all provinces. So it will mean more pressure in Canadian Federation. And other problems that we can add to that is that we have two pay-as-you-go system in Canada and in Quebec. So Quebec has its own pension scheme, and the rest of Canada has another pension scheme. Moreover, there were some reform in the public health system. Previously, it was following the increase of the transfer from the federal state, where was following the needs from the people. So they were looking at the needs and transferring money thanks to the needs, but no, it's not true. So provinces will rely more and more on their own money to finance health. And it's one of the big problems when you have these two tails with an aging province working less, which requires more public transfers. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julien. And, okay, our next speaker is Bernard Hammer and Sonia Spitzer and Alexia Bernkrantz-Berskowitz on economic well-being, changes in income at different stages during the last decade.
Okay, this research complements the paper Sonia presented earlier. We are looking at age-specific changes in income in 9 European countries. The time period is the time after the economic crisis from 2008 to 2007. Just to motivate this shows an indicator which we included in the European demographic data sheet. It shows the median equivalized income of the young population versus the median income of the older adult population, and its changes over this time period. So if it's negative, it says that the income or economic well-being of younger generations declined relative to the older population. And orange, yellow, and red values indicating decline, and the green colors in the map and increase. And we see that in most Western and Southern or Central European countries, the economic position of the young population declined relative to the older adult population. Only in the Netherlands and in some Eastern European, or in the Eastern European countries, it increased. This had an effect also on the age-specific poverty rate. You see here just an example of France. This green line represents the risk of monetary poverty for children, or representing family households, and the orange line for the elderly population. And we see this massive or really strong decline in risk of poverty for the elderly population, and this stagnation, or in France even the increase for the young. And this is a picture which looks very similar in other European countries. So our objective with this paper is to understand the generational patterns of these income changes between 2008 and 2017. And we distributed in 3 research questions. We will first look at the changes in aggregate income, in taxes and benefits, so the change in the public redistribution over this time period. Then we have a look at the age-specific changes of net income, and we try to decompose these changes. So if it's due to a change in employment rates or changes in income per employed person, or if this income changes is due to increases or changes in social benefits. Included are 9 European countries: Austria, Estonia, Greece, Spain, France, Italy, Poland, Sweden, and Slovenia, because these countries provide information on net income in EOSILC. So in NTA data, we always look at the age profiles, but already the aggregate values contain a lot of information. So this is not exactly the aggregate values as we have it in NTA. I'm focusing on the household sector alone at the primary income of households. So this would be asset income and labor income, the share of taxes relative to primary income, and the social benefits relative to primary income. And I show these results in a table. So I have 3 indicators: this changes in real primary income over this 10-year period, the changes in income taxes relative to primary income, and the changes in social benefits relative to primary income. And in this first column, we see that in 6 out of the 9 European countries, this real primary income per capita declined. And we see this huge decline in Greece by almost 1/3, and also a very strong decline in Spain and Italy, but also in Austria and France. When we look at the income taxes relative to primary income, we see a stagnation or an increase in all of the countries, a very strong increase in Greece. And when we look at the social benefits, it also reflects this stronger public redistribution relative to income in 2017 versus 2008. So the social benefits relative to primary income increased in these countries. But now let's have a look what this means for different age groups. We distinguish 3 age groups, those from 20 to 39, 40 to 59, and 60 plus. The data source is a survey data. It's the European Survey of Income and Living Conditions, which contains detailed information on income. So the most important income components are income from employment and from public transfers, which are paid to individuals like pensions, unemployment benefits. But we also include the other income components, which are only given at household level in EU-SILC, but which are assigned to individuals like family benefits, which are assigned to the caregiver, asset income to all adults in the household, and imputed rents are also included. They are assigned to the person responsible for the dwelling. So if we have now a look at how this net income changed over the time period based on the EU-SILC survey, we have in the first column the youngest group from 20 to 39, in the middle column this colored column, the age group 40 to 59, and in the right the age group 60 plus. And we see that in many countries the income declined for the youngest population. There was a strong increase only in Estonia, and this increased. This decline was very strong, more than 40% lower income in 2017 versus 2008, but also a strong decrease in Italy and Spain. So this older working age population also faced a decline in Greece, Spain and Italy, but interesting that the population 60 plus, the income of the population 60 plus increased in all the countries except Greece. And if you have a closer look, you also see this decline in income was much smaller for the elderly population in Greece than for the younger population. Also noticeable this shift of income, the strong decline in Italy and Spain versus the income of the old population increased over the same time period. And we also see a similar pattern, less pronounced, but similar also in Austria and France. Now the question, what happened at this time period? Why did this income of the young decrease so strongly in some countries, and why has the income of the elderly increased in all of the countries? So is it an effect of employment, or which type of income is responsible for this development? And we decompose these income changes. First, we can make a distinction by type of income, distinguishing income from employment, income from public transfers, and other types of income. And then we decompose the changes in changes in employment and the change in income per employed person, simply assuming that the change that cannot be explained by change in employment must be a change in the income per employed person. And similar for the changes in public transfers, they are mostly directed at persons who are not in employment. So we distinguish them in changes in the number of the non-employed person, or the share of the non-employed person, and changes in transfer received per non-employed person. So if we have a look at this, we have only a look at the youngest age group and the oldest age group. So we look at the youngest age group. The changes in total income can mainly be explained by changes in labor income. So the other income components are not so important. Interesting then, how was it this change due to a change in employment or income per employment? It depends. If we look at Estonia.
1 minute.
I will finish in 1 minute. Yes, it was strong increase in income per employed person in Estonia. The changes in Greece was mainly due to a change in decrease in wages per employed person, and in Spain and Italy, this decrease in income of younger persons was mainly due to a reduction in employment. So for the elderly group, it's not so clear. It was an increase in income of employment as well as an increase in public transfers. And when we decompose these changes, we see a strong increase in all the countries in income per non-employed person. So that let's say pensions per person increased quite strongly in most of the countries. So to summarize, there are some general patterns: stagnating, declining aggregate income in most of the countries, increase in public sector redistribution. For the young population, we saw stagnating, declining incomes, and the reasons are stagnating incomes and in most countries, as in Italy and Spain at least, declining employment rates. For the population 60 plus, we saw a strong increase in income of the population, which was due to an increase in employment rates among this group and an increase in public transfers received per person in this age group. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernard. I believe our next presentation will be by video. That's by, so Marty, perhaps you can start that up. That's by Alfonso Harans Lantan, Guadalupe Sute, Sergio Escuelas Barroso, Gemma Abil, and Concepcion Pacho, The Evolution of Public and Private Transfers Between Age Groups in Spain, the Impact of Demography in the Welfare State.
Hi everybody, hola desde España, aloha Hawaii. This is Guadalupe Soto from the Spanish NTA team. I'm presenting a research in progress that other members of the NTA Spanish team, Sio Pachot, Gemma Bio, and myself, are developing at this moment in collaboration with other two colleagues from the University of Barcelona, of the Department of Economic History, Alfonso Arranz and Sergio Espuelas. Our goal in this research is to build historical NTAs for Spain in order to observe, to analyze changes and the evolution of the system of intergenerational flows and transfers in Spain in the long term. As usual in this kind of research, the main restriction is data availability. In Spain, the first household budget survey was launched in 1958, but it contains very poor data for NTA because it's not representative of the whole population. New weights were launched in 1964 and 1973, but unfortunately, microdata are missing and cannot be used. So the first complete household budget surveys with all the information we need to build NTAs are those for 1980 and 1990 that, thanks to a research group in the Universidad Carlos III in Madrid, is digitized and now available for being used by researchers. So in this presentation, I am going to show you our results for the NTA in Spain in 1980 and 1990 and compare them to the more recent results for 2000 and 2012 in order to analyze the evolution of the different profiles. We will also present a very preliminary estimation for a previous year, is 1960, but is for the moment very preliminary because we have to explode a lot of different data sources and made a lot of assumptions that for the moment make us to be very cautious with the results. It is important before starting to present the historical NTAs for Spain to take into account the important political changes that Spain has after 1975 with the end of dictatorship and when starting profound changes both in socioeconomic structures and in all the aggregates. For example, I plot here the per capita GDP, and as you can see, the change after the 80s is very important. And we can also observe the effects of the two economic crises, the one in the early 90s and the Great Depression, the Great Recession in 2000, after 2008. Also, regarding demographic, we have very important changes. I have plotted here the evolution of the total population by broad age group, and as you can see, changes from the second part of the last century and the 20th and 21st century are quite important, and this is basically due to the evolution of these two variables, life expectancy and total fertility. I have plotted here Spain in comparison with Europe, which is the green one, and Southern Europe, which is the red one. And as you can see, for life expectancy, Spain has the highest in Europe, and regarding total fertility, we have the lowest one. So we can expect that the aging process in Spain is being harder than in the rest of Europe, and of course in the rest of the world. Here we have the first results of the historical NTAs. In this case, the per capita labor income profile. And as you can see, we can observe important changes between 1980, 1990, and 2000. And also, very interesting, we have an important change in 2012 after the Great Recession hit Spain. As you can see, the most important changes for the young workers that remain practically the same until 2000 is in 2012 due to the economic crisis. On the contrary, from people in the central age workings from 25 or 30 to 50 or 55, the increase between 1980 and 2000 is really, really important. And regarding 2012, it is also very interesting to observe the movement to the right of the labor income profile. So the young workers were the most affected, while the labor income for older workers increased regarding 2000. Regarding consumption, we observe also very interesting changes between 1980 and 1990 to the more recent profiles. Even not only the level, but also the shape. As you can see, the shape for the consumption of the elderly was decreasing, but in 2000 was more flat, and in 2012, it increased. In fact, it's the part of the consumption profile that increased more. A little also for young children, but for the working age population, it remains practically stable. But for older population, per capita total consumption increased remarkably. It is interesting to distinguish between the evolution of public consumption and private consumption. Regarding public consumption, between the end of the 20th century and today, there is an important increase in the both dependent sides of the life cycle, both for the children and for the elderly. As you see, the public consumption in the 1980 and 1990 was completely, practically flat for all the ages, but here started to be increasing. And regarding private consumption, also we have a significant change here. This is the change that we saw in the total consumption, that this declining profile changed to an increase in profile in 2012, especially for those aged less than 70. As a consequence, regarding life cycle deficit, with respect to 1980, we observe a considerable increase in the life cycle deficit, both of the young and of the elderly. And also in the the surplus of the working age population. And again, you can see here the movement to the right and also the decrease in the surplus of working age population. If we look now at the financing sources of the LCD, we can, first of the net public transfers, we can observe a considerable increase here in public transfer addressed to the children, but especially to the elderly. The increase is much more important here than here, especially if you look at 2090 or 1990 or 1980. On the other side, the taxes and social contributions net paid by the working age population also increased and stopped with the economic crisis. So in 2012 were practically the same than in 2000, except for older workers. And for the private transfers, the changes are smaller than in the case of public transfers. And I would highlight the change here for this group of ages, basically 15, 20 years old or 20 something, probably because of the growing importance of the high education. And here I have added our preliminary estimation for 1960 to the estimations of, in this case, 1980, 2000, and 2012, in order to have a picture about the evolution in the long run. As I said, this is only a very preliminary estimation under revision, but as you can see, the increase of all the profiles is very important, and also it is important to look at the change in the shape, because here both labor income and, as a consequence, life cycle deficit and also consumption are quite flat in comparison with those of the subsequent years. The main findings of our research can be summarized in these three points. First, we have observed a gradual increase in the importance of public transfers as a reallocation mechanism at the same time that the welfare state was consolidated in the country with the democracy. Second, there is also a gradual increase of the importance of the elderly in the size of total reallocations. And probably more important than this is the third point, that we have observed the progressive bias of the government transfers towards sustaining the elderly's income. So as a consequence, poverty risk tends to be concentrated in families with dependent children. And in order to illustrate this point and its importance, I have selected two indicators from Eurostat in the last 15 years, from 2005 to 2018. The first one is the percentage of people at risk of poverty or social exclusion by age group in Spain. And if you look at the picture in 2005, it is quite different, it's completely different. Basically, it's opposite to the one in 2018. So here, people with the highest risk of poverty or social exclusion was elderly, all people, but here in 2018, this is the less risk of poverty, basically because pensions have acted as a security net for these people, and there was no net for young people, especially young workers, and for the children. And this picture is also repeated here when we look at people at risk of poverty by type of household. If you look at 2007, the difference between households with and without the dependent children was really small, less than 1 percentage point, but along the economic crisis, this difference has increased a lot. And in 2018, we have the last data from Eurostat, you can see that the risk for a household without children is less than before the crisis, but for households with children, it has practically doubled. So it's now near 20% of people living in households with dependent children who are in risk of poverty. So poverty tends to concentrate in households with children, and maybe this is a good reason to rethink the relocation system and particularly the welfare state. And that's all for my side. I hope you have enjoyed my presentation, and I wait for your comments or suggestions. Thank you very much.
Talk is Cedillo Villar, Unequal Opportunities of Human Capital Investment from Different Socioeconomic Origins in Mexico, 1994, 2006, and 2014.
Good morning from Mexico. Today, I would like to introduce my research topic, Unequal Opportunities of Human Capital Investment from Different Socioeconomic Origins in Mexico, 1994, 2006, and 2014. This paper is a preliminary result of my thesis on population studies at El Colegio de México. I'm going to divide my presentation in 4 sections. First, some data about Mexican economy. Secondly, Human Development Index as a complex indicator of inequality. Then, NTA profiles disaggregated by HDI. And finally, I'm going to point out some further research questions. What is the motivation of this paper? The inequality in Mexico affects the opportunities and the economic growth. The SDG claim that the governments must reduce the inequality and increase the access to education. It's not possible to understand the NTA profiles in Mexico without socioeconomic inequality. Some data about Mexico. The poverty is a very important issue in Mexico. Around 33% of population in Mexico lives in poverty. That means they live with less than $5.5 US. Also, if we just think about the gross national incomes, apparently it has been rising. However, the gross domestic product comes in 25% from informal economy. And finally, 70% of transfers comes from household. That means the family transfers at household level are the main source of economic support in Mexico. I'm just going to present the general profiles of private consumption, labor income, and the life cycle deficit for 1994, 2006, and 2014. In the general NTA approach, we can just analyze the data at national level by age. However, if we use the Human Development Index as a complex inequality indicator, and we can estimate that at household and individual level following this methodology. We can have a compound index, the Human Development Index, that is the geometric product of the Material Welfare Index, the Education Index, and the Health Index. That allows to have 3 dimensions of socioeconomic inequality. The Material Welfare Index was estimated by principal component analysis with polychoric correlation matrix. The Education Index was estimated by Hurdle negative binomial regression model, and the Health Index was estimated by regression model to predict life expectancy at the individual level. With this index was possible to link the NTA profiles with a comparable socioeconomic inequality perspective. Now, it is time to look at some NTA profiles disaggregated by HDI, in the case of Mexico, for 1994, 2006, and 2014. I'm just going to present some preliminary results because it is a lot of information that we can analyze after disaggregate the NTA profiles by these 3 index and the composed index. By labor income, by subgroups of HDI, it is important to notice that there are huge differences in terms of labor income between people who belong to the low HDI level if we compare to people who belong to high HDI level. And these gaps between low and high increases over time in terms of labor. Also, if we analyze the self-employment labor income, it is very relevant to notice that people with the low HDI must have less opportunities than people in the high level. And finally, in terms of consumption of durable goods and health consumption, people with low HDI observe less probability to spend their income in other consumptions because their health consumption is really high. And this is important in all ages. While people with higher HDI have the higher health consumption in younger ages, people with low HDI have a very high expenditure in health in all ages. And the people who invest in health in young ages is mainly people with high HDI. Just those few graphs shows that the Human Development Index help us to analyze deeply the NTA profiles considering inequality. So, it is possible to use the HDI as a complex inequality index for the whole MSHIE. That means we can estimate the NTA profiles from 1990 to 2018 for Mexico. That is possible because we have a survey for one single survey for income and expenditure. And following this methodology of estimation of Human Development Index is possible to analyze with a single inequality indicator how the NTA profiles change over time. Estimate NTA profiles considering HDI allows to point out the implications of inequality. And finally, after estimate these NTA profiles, the next step is achieve a cohort analysis for Mexico. And this is a very relevant topic because in that way we can analyze in the long run the behavior on the NTA profiles considering inequality. Thank you so much for your attention.
And now we are ready to move on to our discussants. And the first discussant is Hippolyte Dalby.
So great presentation. It was so there is a lot to say. But I'm going to try to be quite quick and try to have like a direct comment to each presentation. So the first one, was by Julien and Marcel, and it was about Canada. So it's a fascinating next step for NTA to try to compare regions within a country. I would love to do that for France, and we see with Julien that it's really promising. So my main question is how to deal with difference in the inflation rate, basically across region. In some of the figure that Julien show, we have, for instance, real consumption, in Quebec and in other Canadian region, but might be that the CPI is not the same. And so I'm not specialized, in Canada and in Canadian region, but I know that, for instance, that housing price and rent could be much lower in Montreal than in other major Canadian city. So if it's not possible to use different CPI, per region, I would recommend maybe to use another denominator. That could be labor income, for instance, but I would like to hear the authors what they think about that. And once again, I'm not specialized in Canada, but I know that public transfer from the federal budget to the various regions depend on a rule that is based on basically average income of the region and also the population size. And I was wondering whether this kind of study could suggest that we should include other determinants, such that an aging ratio, for instance. The second paper was presented by Bernard. So it's a very nice study that highlights the heterogeneity of the generational divide across Europe. There are many countries that are studied, and it's a very nice follow-up of the Agenda research program. I'm not so sure, if I may, a very small critique. I'm not so sure that slide 3, which is let's say the motivation part, on poverty, is so related to the rest of the study. And I've seen that Guadalupe also use this poverty rate, by age group. Those kind of graphs are highly political. Usually they show those kind of graphs to simply say that we should reduce public transfer towards the old in order to improve the situation of the youngest. I do not believe that reducing the pension, to the oldest could improve the poverty rate of the youngest. I feel that this is completely different issue, so I will not use it, but I will be happy to hear you. I'm wondering also whether choosing 2008 as a starting date is a good idea, because I know that the crisis have impacted quite differently the various countries in Europe. So maybe that the reference base, year is not it might be that the results are not robust, to a change in the base year. There is an issue about data for Greece. I wonder whether they have investigated the fact that notably, public figures for Greece are reliable. Of course, they are published, but they might not be reliable. Part of the idea of the crisis was because of that. There is a small issue that if you are, for instance, 35-year-old in 2008, it means that you're in 2017, you are in another age category because you are 44. So then it's not so clear whether you did gain or lose, over the period. And I was wondering whether it's possible to have a more life cycle perspective, on that, or cohort perspective, if you wish. And I'm not so sure about what would be the policy message of the study. And I will be happy to hear the author on that. Then there is another fascinating paper by a group of Spanish economists. So we did a few years ago the same exercise for France, and I know that it's a lot of work. So congratulations to the team, to Guadalupe and her co-authors. Building those multi-period NTA is very complicated. One kind of remark I had when I was presenting the various profile by date, the various age profile by date, is that might be that there might be not so different from one year to another one. Okay, and it could be nice to build some, I would say, some confidence interval for the profile in order to see whether they are quite different from one year to another one. Okay? And I have noticed, for instance, in your presentation, that some profiles are much smoother than others. Which creates some, at least we may have some question, about the number of, so you said in your presentation that a survey could be different from one year to another one, mainly that the number of observations change also. And therefore, some profile might be more reliable than others. A small question about net private transfer. I don't know what happened, at age 60 in 2000, because there is a kind of hump, which is a bit strange. And if I do a little bit of publicity on my earlier work, I could suggest, another way to present the results. In a paper with Julien, we presented the funding source, of consumption, for a given age group. Here it's for the young, and we've grouped all the funding source, by being the state or individual resources and the family, and we could see very clearly, over time, who finance the consumption of a particular age group. For Elvira, thank you for your presentation. I'm very sorry because I was not able to see it before the meeting. So my comments will be, I've simply written them now, I've not prepared them before the meeting. So it's great. It's a great idea. I've not seen that before, to create some profile by, let's say, level of HDI. Okay, so it's an interesting idea. So if I understand well, the idea is that you have some individual NTA data, and then you group individuals, by a level of HDI, and then you create your groups and you compare the profile of the various groups. I have a small question because I'm not so sure how we could proceed to compute the life expectancy at the individual level. Life expectancy is an important criteria in the HDI, and then I have the impression that you get it out of an estimation, and I'm thinking that might be that you are using some information that are always there, in other dimension, of the HDI index, and so I'm wondering whether it's so relevant. And then I have another question about the child. Do they have the HDI of their parents, or do they have their own HDI index? I feel that it's something that is not so clear. Ron, I'm done. And congratulations to the authors. They have done great work.
Thank you very much, Hippolyte. Let's see. Okay. Now, I think on this discussion will be done by video because the...
Hi, this is Anchi Tan. I apologize that I have to pre-record because it is midnight in Taiwan now and the Wi-Fi connection is usually unstable at this hour. So I have to confess that I did not hear the presentations and the following discussions are based on the PPTs of the first 3 papers only. And also, since I'm the second discussant, my questions may sound irrelevant or redundant. Anyway, let me share with you some thoughts on these 4 excellent papers. The first paper is on Canada. In slide 5, the authors asked how this imbalance between age groups and provinces is explained: public transfers, labor income, or others. I'd like to ask another question: that does migration also have a role here, or is it not a problem at all? Well, migration can be a self-selection process with a vicious circle, starting from low wages and or biased welfare program. The young or the skilled may leave, resulting in faster population aging, lower wages, larger fiscal deficits, which will then cause more outmigration. I wonder what the authors think. The second question is, while we are looking at the problems of Quebec, what will be the policy implication to Canadian Federation, who also bear the consequences? On the second paper, I also have 2 questions. The first question is a definition question, that there are 4 types of income mentioned, but 2 are not defined. On page 8, there is the net real income. So what is the real? Is it PPP adjusted? And on page 10, there is the total net income. Is it tax included? My real question is, which of the 4 incomes are more relevant, or are they equally important? Page 11, I noticed that the total net income of the 60 plus group changed by 7% in both Estonia and Slovenia. In Estonia, it is due to higher employment and higher social benefit among the unemployed. But how to think about Slovenia when all these ratios are small So what then are the implications for this study? Then the question on the third paper, I have two questions about the 1960 data. The first is, can you tell us a little more on how you plan to estimate asset reallocation and private transfers, given that there is no or little microdata? The second question is, the real values of labor income and consumption in 1960 look small, and their age profiles, according to the presentation, are flat. So does flat here imply equality across age groups, or simply a reflection of data restriction? Also, if these age profiles are normalized, will they look less flat? I will show you the Taiwan case in a moment. Finally, on the last paper, there is an assumption or a hypothesis that a higher economic life cycle deficit suggests less possible transfer of resources to dependents. So while this hypothesis sounds plausible, to be more complete in the analysis, shall we also consider asset income, which is another way to finance LCD? Second, as LCD is a residual, hence can fluctuate a lot, what about using consumption or labor income instead or in addition to LCD? Finally, I have a question of my own. How to compare 2 years? This follows from my presentation in Generation Economy 1 session on the first day of the conference, but it is relevant to Spain, Mexico, and many other countries. On the left is the per capita labor income of Taiwan in 1951 in blue, 1981 in orange, and 2016 in gray. And these shapes look quite normal. In the middle is the labor income expressed in 2016 value. Now, 1951, the blue one, is hardly visible. This is because the real GDP per capita has risen 37 times between 51 and 2016. And on the right is a more dramatic presentation. When labor income is normalized by GDP per capita of each year, then 51, the blue line, rises up to the top. This, of course, has to do with the labor income share in GDP. But my question is, or my problem is, to trace the labor income of a specific cohort, I have to shift from curve to curve with very different values against the rapid economic changes. So what is the right way to discount or to normalize? I would appreciate very much if people can share some of their thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anji. Boy, what a terrific set of presentations and a terrific fair discussions. Now we have a few minutes for a general discussion, and let me start by Sung Yap sent me some a question or observation by chat. Would you like
just very
say something about that, Sung Yap?
Yeah, okay. So I have this decomposition for all the world, try to see whether changing in wage per employee versus a change in labor force participation affect their income. So it was very interesting to see that Estonia and also, and the Greece, right? So Estonia's increase in labor among over elderly is driven by income per employee. And the Greece is the same, right? So it's the decline is mostly driven by the income per employee. But if you look at all the countries like labor force participation of elderly, Greece has one of the lowest labor force participation of elderly, but Estonia is number 3 in the world. So actually, I expected the opposite result that I just want to say that Greece is example. I mean, the exception, because usually the country with very low labor force participation due to their pension benefit, their change in income, labor income, is mostly driven by their labor force participation. But I saw that Greece is actually exception. Just comment, okay? So it doesn't have to be that way, but you know what I'm saying, because people actually retire. And if they change their labor income, that's in large part driven by their change in labor force participation rate. If their labor force participation rate is very low. But anyway, that's not the case for Greece. It's just a comment. I found this one very fascinating. Okay,
okay, thank you. I'm going to make a brief comment myself, which is that from several of these talks, I think, and I think this is quite consistent with the US experience as well, we see the elderly doing generally very well in times of the Great Recession, in hard economic times, because so much of their income comes from public transfers that are set by defined benefit pension rules and healthcare programs and so on, whereas the young and prime age, working age population suffers. And to me, this suggests that our pension programs and other public transfers should be redesigned so that the pain of economic reversals is shared more evenly across the generations. And the same is true for the pain of population aging. We shouldn't just be keeping benefits fixed and raising tax rates on the young. We have to share the pain. That's just an observation, not a question. Who else has a question here that they'd like to ask? You can chat to me, or you can just mute yourself and start talking.
So it's about the Spanish paper. It's super job. I like it a lot, and what I have is more like a comment that I need to confirm whether my thought is correct. And it's related exactly to the last topic that you raised, Ron. And so in principle, if we start thinking about when the social security system was introduced in Spain, it was in 1986. And it's super generous. In principle, the replacement rate is 100%. And exactly the people that they were retiring exactly during the Great Recession are the ones who have the best spells. So they don't have unemployment spells almost. So I think that that's the main reason for such a rise in the pension benefits that they are getting relative to all other people. So I think that this is the consequence of having a very generous pension system. So it's like a warning to everyone, all other countries in the world, that this is exactly what will happen in the future, was that you have population aging plus a crisis. So I just need whether this is the Spanish thing can confirm it or not.
Who else has a comment or question?
Just a simple one, which is that for Bernard, I would have thought it would be more usual to cut off ages at, say, 25 instead of 20, so that the results for that group aren't so influenced by increasing university participation. So I was wondering, do you think your results would be very different if the age range, excluded most university years, especially for those countries like Austria and France, where the decline was on the lower end of the scale? All right, thanks.
Okay, I will try it with different age groups just to see it, but I think it's not the increasing participation in education what would make a difference, but that in some countries this young age group, like from 15 to 25, was very strong affected by unemployment. So the changes in employment rate would probably differ than if we use different cutoff points. I think this would be the most important difference.
Guadalupe,
Yes.
you have
Thank you.
a comment?
Well, yeah, well, there are lots of comments. So first of all, I want to thank you, everybody who made a contribution. This is a research in progress, as I said, so all the comments are very welcome as suggestions of Hippolyte to build confidence intervals and also for present the results. So I really appreciate that. And I just want to answer some of the questions that not only the generosity of the pension system in Spain, but there is also an issue with the number of red IDs, because in the last years, the very first baby boomers are entering in retirement. So we have two sources for increasing the pension expenditure, both the number and also the generosity of the pensions, the amount of pensions. And also the system in Spain started in '67, but it's true that at first it was imperceptible, and it started to have a great importance after the 90s. And also regarding the issue of poverty, I never tried to say about the need to cut pensions, but I think that public transfers have revealed a very powerful thing to reduce poverty and also to fight against poverty and I don't know the name now. Sorry. So I think we should rethink the welfare state, not cutting pensions, but also trying to redistribute also to the young population, to the younger population, especially if we think in the consequences that it will have in the future, because poverty for children has very negative consequences then in labor income, and of course when they retire. So maybe it's time we start to look at what is happening in the other side of the life cycle, but not thinking in cutting pensions at all. And thank you very much again.
Okay, I think this has been just a terrific session, and it's 10:15 in Berkeley, I guess 7:15 in Honolulu, and time to call it to an end. Thank you all for attending, and goodbye.